Hey, it's Ben. So today I want to talk about the uh, today's live stream. We'll be talking about the journey from disconnect to intimacy. And yesterday I was recording a, a live stream on, let's see, I wrote this in-depth article called "Why Does Love Come So Easily to Some and Not to Others?" But one of the challenges of, here I write these in-depth articles, and I pack so much information into these articles, and because there's many different interconnecting aspects of, for instance, again, for some people love comes easily. It just happens. They fall into it, or it falls into their lap. And then there's those of us who we've struggled at different parts of our lives. There may be some people, for a time they have someone and there's this amazing loving connection, but it comes to an end. Like, I've known of many instances where a couple had this amazing connection, but maybe one of them dies or something. Like, I spent a lot of time staying in the former war zone in northern Sri Lanka, for instance, and I hear these accounts of, just a lot of times, many of the rebel fighters, from the LTTE, and these people are fighting for their survival, basically, and and yet, many of them died in battle, and their partners who are left behind, they never find anyone again, or maybe if they do, it's just not quite the same. So, but anyway, a lot of people struggle to find any kind of meaningful connection, and there's just so much heartache, a lot of frustration, and they get into relationships. Oftentimes they end up attracting individuals into their lives who are unavailable, sometimes hurtful, abusive. They can end up spending years in psychotherapy, listen to all kinds of podcasts and other YouTube informational videos, read books and articles, and their relationships are not working, and they're spinning around in their heads. They're just struggling so hard to attempt to make their relationship work, to gain an intellectual understanding of why their relationship's not working. They're talking it out with their friends incessantly. And I've done that before myself in times past. And, especially those of us who have, if at any point in our lives we've struggled with anxious attachment style, it could be extraordinarily difficult and painful, because we often form attachments to individuals who themselves are deeply wounded, but their own wounding is such that they create all these barriers to intimacy. And if someone's getting close to them, us or anyone else, to them, that feels like threatening. It's they feel that, for them it's intrusive, it's overwhelming, it feels like it's taking over them in their life, and so they put that wall up. They push us back. They start distancing themselves from us. They're not responding to our calls or texts or whatever. And then, because we feel insecure, then, for instance, we react, and it makes us feel more desperate, and we try to hold on even more. and so then, on the other end, they become more reactive, and maybe they just completely ghost us or stop talking to us. Um, and in the midst of all that, they blame us for the fact that we're reacting. But there's this, on one hand, with them, there's often this disconnect emotionally that they don't feel the pain so much like we do if we have the more insecure attachment style. They have their own emotional wounding. But anyway, there's so many different variations of all these relational dynamics that play out. And one of the main, where we get into so much trouble is the fact that so many of us have this profound disconnect emotionally. And so again, what happens is we're up in our heads. We end up ruminating incessantly. We analyze it to death. We'll spend hours and hours talking it over with any friend we can get to listen to us. We're talking with our psychotherapist. And psychotherapy can, for many of us, it's an important part of our healing journey. But again, where we get into trouble is it stays at that mental level of we're just trying to figure it out. And as though that's going to solve the problem. It's an important part of the process, but if we only go as far as the intellect, oftentimes what happens is these patterns that we're enacting in our intimate, or more likely not so intimate relationships tend to just perpetuate themselves indefinitely. Because I had these patterns myself of, if you've heard from other videos where I described, growing up, there's a lot of physical, emotional abuse that I endured. And like so many others who experience a lot of this emotional wounding or trauma, the tendency is we disconnect. We disconnect from our feelings, our physical bodies. It leaves us in kind of a dissociated state. And so we tend to go off into fantasy land. And especially as we come of age, we're growing into adolescence, we're forming these romantic attachments, and then carrying on over into our adulthood. And when relationships are not working, we're in this disconnected state. Again, often there's all this projection. We project onto the other person. We don't see them for who they truly are. We have these notions like, oh, that person's our soulmate. We're meant to be together. If he or she just only, if they understood, they're so, we make all these excuses or justifications or rationalizations or construct all these narratives that we get caught up in. But in doing so, often we're profoundly disconnected from these deep levels of our emotional wounding and our physical bodies as well. And because we have this disconnect, there's all these powerful emotions, many of which are residing within the subconscious mind. Our bodies in the subconscious. And we're forming bonds. We're forming these attachments to other individuals based upon this emotional wounding from parts of us that reside deep within our bodies, deep within the subconscious mind. We form these attachments to other individuals. There's a lot of distortion. It's like looking through this filter or this lens, or forming attachment through a very distorted kind of filter. And that filter is based on a lot of confusion, a lot of painful emotions that we haven't processed. It's all sitting down there. We're up in our heads, and our mind's going up on one level, but then again, we got all these painful emotions trapped in our body. And when you got all those highly charged emotions, there's that emotional wounding. It operates out of whole separate neurotracks, different parts of our brain that are sitting there in the background. Yeah, so there's different levels of thought processes. They're not all conscious. When you do really deep, intensive meditation practices, I do, if you have the opportunity to work with me individual one-on-one sessions, or as I do, where I go into the mountains, the Vision Quest. It's a traditional Native American healing practice where you go out to fast the 4 days and nights with no food and no water, alone in the mountains. Like, what happens for me as I go on the Vision Quest is that all these, for instance, there have been times when I was going through some big drama in a relationship that wasn't quite working. And as I said, I'd be caught up in the narrative, the projection, the fantasies and everything, but I'd be on the Vision Quest. And this whole deeper level of all these emotions would come out that I've been holding in my body. And oftentimes there were other memories that would come out of past relationships, sometimes going all the way back to childhood. And I would see and feel I could feel the emotions of my current situation, many of the emotions that were held in my body that I wasn't fully aware of. I could also feel emotions pertaining to this past trauma that maybe I'd gone through in childhood, or a romantic relationship or some other important relationship in my life that had happened years and years before. All that would be coming up simultaneously, and I would be processing it. And so as that happened, it would be healing, resolving these deep emotional wounds from the past. And also I would be processing all the emotions from the current relational drama, and I would gain this clarity or insight that I didn't have before. And it would help me to start dissolving those unhealthy attachments. And if I continued in the relationship with the current person, for instance, it would get me to a healthier place where I could see things more objectively. And it was like building this new foundation or new model from which I could relate. And so I would relate in healthier ways. And it would clean up the relationship. And sometimes, if it was a really dysfunctional attachment relationship, a lot of times those attachments would dissolve, and I would either get over that person, let go of that attachment, move on, and graduate to healthier connections. So this has been a very valuable process for me. And because I had to dig myself out of a deep hole, it was just very intuitive that I taught myself, as a combination doing practice, the system of meditation practices I developed, going through the Vision Quest, all these interventions and practices that I've incorporated over the years. So where a lot of people get into so much trouble is the fact that from childhood, we were never really taught how to deal with our authentic emotional responses. In many instances, we were taught to suppress, deny, distract ourselves, anything, so as not to feel, not to acknowledge, not to admit what we feel. Sometimes we were shamed for what we feel emotionally. you know, and especially as I mentioned in the previous video, for a lot of boys, adolescent males, men, there's this like big boys don't cry. Men are not supposed to show their emotions, all that. And so, and as men, that really fucks us up. Boys, men, whatever, it fucks us up severely. You know, in some respects, women have a bit more permission to feel their emotional. And in some ways, it I'm struggling to find the right words right now, but to some extent, okay. But we deny or disconnect in many ways from our emotions. And in doing so, we go up into our head. But by disconnecting emotionally, and we go up into our heads, and so we rely too much just on our intellect to try to make sense of things. When we're struggling with this emotional wounding that is playing out in our relationships, the way we form attachments, whether we form attachments to individuals who are unavailable, disinterested, abusive, and we get into all kinds of dysfunctional relational dynamics. If we stay up in our head, there's no way in hell that we can truly heal the emotional wounding, that we can't access the deep underlying source of our emotional wounding. Our intellectual understanding is a crucial part of our healing. And I continue, like I'll listen to podcasts, and there's a lot of fascinating, informative videos on YouTube, and books. And I haven't worked with a psychotherapist since I was, decades ago, when I was in my mid to late 20s. But there's always more to learn. But intellectual understanding by itself only goes so far. I've known lots of people that they've gone through relationships and they were subjected to this horrendous like narcissistic abuse, and they were just like savaged by it. It just ripped their guts out, it tore them up. And so they read all these books and listen to a shitload of videos, and they got to figure it out. But the problem is, in so many instances, they're not healing those deep emotional wounds. They sort of got it down. They got it down to a certain extent up in their head, and they know the red flags, and they're okay. They got their boundaries now, and so they're going to spot those red flags, and they're going to again attempt to maintain those boundaries. But because they haven't done the deep level processing that needed to facilitate the healing of the deep emotional wounds, then what happens a lot of times is those deeply wounding experiences, how they just got ripped up emotionally, just really torn up, and all that pain and devastation, all that doesn't heal, it doesn't process, and a lot of it just stays trapped in the body. And so in many instances, it's, there's still that, if anyone gets close to them, there's a reactivity, or there's this tension or guardedness, or there's this deadening, and it diminishes their capacity to truly love and be loved. And so the fact that I too experience this trauma and emotional wounding carrying over from my childhood and adolescence, and then I was reenacting it in my adult relationships as I would attempt to form attachments, or as I formed attachments and attempt to form relationships, and And previously, I was stuck in that trap too, just spinning around and around, trying to figure it out, overanalyzing it to death, talking with whatever friends I could get to listen to me, and talking to the psychotherapist I was working with at the time. But in many ways, I was avoiding the pain. I was avoiding those incredibly painful emotions because I just didn't want to go there. I didn't want to feel that. It felt so horrible. But if you can't feel it, you're not going to heal it. If you truly want to heal, you need to go there. Seriously, you need to go there, to those places where you feel most vulnerable, where those places where it hurts like hell, fully, you know. And again, as I've described before, when relationships blowing up on you, someone's ghosted you, person's not reciprocating your love, acknowledge what's happening. And then what does it feel like? Not think, not what does it think, but what does it feel like? Does it is there's this horrible feeling of like you're losing the love of your life and you'll never love again, or there's a whole range of feelings. It's just one of many examples, but what does it actually feel like, and where are those feelings situated in your body? Usually, unless you're totally shut down or disconnected emotionally, those feelings are gonna register, say in your chest cavity, your solar plexus, down in your abdomen, your throat. It could be in other areas too, but predominantly between your throat and your abdomen is where the feelings usually register. So acknowledge what's happening, what you feel, where the feelings are, and bring as much of your awareness as you can. Get deep inside those feelings and breathe very softly and very deeply from the depth of those feelings. You want to be breathing very, very deeply, because if it's way up in your chest where you're breathing, you can't process your emotions when you're breathing very shallowly. You need to deepen your breathing all the way down. Now, your abdomen expands, your chest, your rib cage expands. You're breathing as slowly and deeply as you can. You stay connected with these feelings. Understand that it takes time. It's not like 3 minutes. It's not 5 minutes. Often this can be an ongoing process. It can go on indefinitely because these emotional wounds took years to develop. And it's not a 5 minute or 5 day process or even 5 month process to totally transform that. It's an ongoing process. But you got to get into your body. You got to get into your feelings to heal these wounds. And also to be making use of the most powerful therapeutic interventions, doing deep tissue body work, because that's going to bring a lot of the emotions trapped in your body. It's going to bring these emotions up to the surface. Work with gifted healers such as myself. Those who work with me individually, the fact that I'm trained by a traditional Native American doctor and medicine man, I act as a conduit. This very powerful presence works through me, goes in, takes that whole experience, these, where you were ghosted or abandoned or, went through this shattering breakup. And it takes that whole experience. You go into this very deep, altered, dreamlike state, and it's taking it, it's working with you so transforming it, you're digesting it, all those highly charged emotions. And as you do that, you come out the other side, you're feeling much lighter, much freer, and you evolve to healthier relationships. So as you make use of these, you're doing practice on a daily basis. You're making consistent use of the most effective therapeutic interventions. Again, you're digesting these experiences, and all those highly charged emotions are being transformed. You're digesting them. As you digest them, they become fuel for your continued growth. You evolve. It creates these healthier internal models. It builds a new foundation. And with this new foundation, you're able to form healthier attachments to attract individuals into your life with whom you could create more meaningful and more deeply fulfilling relationships. Not just your romantic relationships, but it's cleaning up all your relationships in your professional life, in your with family and friends. And so I'll make this a bit shorter today. I have someone coming for an appointment very soon, so I have to get ready for that. But do reach out to me if you're ready to take the next step in your healing journey. I have limited openings, busy schedule, million things to do, but if you want to get on a call with me, I call it the Heart Mending Strategy Session. So you're welcome to, I'll post the link below. Go to my Calendly and book a time with me. Oh, if you like what you hear on this video, definitely click the like and even subscribe to my channel, because I have so many videos that I'm posting here that are addressing a lot of these issues in terms of healing from the devastating breakup or patterns of abandonment, unrequited love, and how you can increase your capacity to love and be loved, and to attract partners, as I said before, with whom you can co-create more meaningful and more deeply fulfilling relationships. So, gotta go for now.